So listen, you guys, you're gonna hear more and more of it. But first of all, can't tell you how thankful we are to have you on here. I'll leave a lot of my comments to the AGM, which will be on in a few hours. But I don't have to tell you guys that it's been a challenge. All I can tell you is that why many of you are wondering when lacrosse is going to get back, and you're working on things. We have been going pretty well nonstop trying to move it forward. We've been working with organizations to find new policies to get things active. I'll talk about more of that later on. But all in all, 2021 looks a little bit more promising. And if that is the case, we're going to need bodies. We're expecting to have a robust high school season. We think college is going to be definitely streamlined down a lot. We'll talk again some more about that. And we already know that starting on, about 3 weeks ago, we began youth lacrosse going, our youth high school lacrosse, and it's been going great guns in 5 locations now for the winter. So I don't want to take any more of Matt's time, but I'm going to tell you this over and over again today every time I talk to you guys. Thank you so much for being here. I know that for many of you, like me, you pay your dues and you wonder what the hell you're getting for it. But believe me, when you hear some of the things we've had to do to get through it, things are continuing. Our bills that we get from places like Arbiter and buying equipment, they don't go away. They keep coming. So we thank you guys for your support of that. And if you haven't paid your dues, please, 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 please get them done as soon as possible. We'd appreciate that. I'll turn it over to Matt because he's got a great presentation. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're gonna hit it hard right out of the box with high school rules, and well, we'll just go ahead and get started, I guess. Let's do this. All right, so here we are. We are going to look at the 2021 high school rule changes. But maybe it's not going to work. I don't know. Let's see. There it is. The good news is they didn't change anything significantly. No new rules from 2020, but there were enough changes in 2020 that many of us did not get to work with very much, that I think it's worth going over. And then we can maybe, if there's a little time at the end, probably talk about some of these a little bit more in depth. Those of you, most of you are going to join MSHSL, so you're going to see this as well. But I think it's not a bad idea to see it more than once. So off we go. So this is the one that is actually a change, because it was in the rule book, but it's a rule that's going into effect. So basically starting January 1, and we've been doing this in the winter leagues, goalkeepers have to wear a chest protector that meets this new NOXI requirement. Just so you guys know, there's a website, sei.net. They actually do the certification or the checking that things meet the standard. You can go out to their website and see if that particular piece of equipment is listed there. We have almost no role in enforcing this requirement, okay? What I am going to ask you to do is, in addition to the standard coach, are all your players legally equipped by rule for this year, to also follow up and say, are all of your goalkeepers wearing chest protectors that meet the new NOXI standard? So it is on the coaches to do this, but we've been asked to kind of just reinforce that by asking it all the time. Now, the good news is this is true from the lowest of levels, U8, well, we don't have goalkeepers at U8, U10, all the way up through college. So it's not like anybody can go, oh, wait, that's happening only in high school. No, it's happening everywhere. US Lacrosse, NCAA, NFHS have all adopted the rule. So that's the first actual change. That's the one new thing you'll have to do this year. CBOs, big deal. They only have to count if there's too many, not too few players on the field. Basically, this comes in, and the only reason I left this slide in is because this is kind of just a standard thing now in lacrosse. A few years ago, we changed the rules on offsides to not be too few, but to be too many players. So we're always looking if there's too many. If there's too few, there are times when we as officials should wait to ensure that the teams have their full complement of players on the field. For example, at a face-off, okay, we should wait. If there's too few, wait, and it's a delay game if they don't have them all out there. But in most cases, we're not really worried if a team's playing with too few players. That's a penalty in and of itself. So we're not bothering with that. So left that one in, not because we do it a lot, but just to emphasize that idea of don't worry if a team is playing with too few players. Be much more worried about when they got too many. Okay, so lots of definitional changes. This looks an absolute mess. So this is what it looks like now. We took out a lot of things that aren't used anymore, things like team possession, cleaned it up, and doesn't really matter a whole lot to us because it really was just updating the rules to match a number of changes that had happened in the past. So off we go. Rule 422. This is the big one that changed. It doesn't look like a lot here, but it is a substantial change. I didn't put all the marked up language on here because it just looks terrible. But this is the rule that now says we restart play without making the defense get 5 yards away from the player with the ball. So this is that new rule. There is a typo in the rule book. So if you go to page 51, they left out the word offensive. Well, I know why we left it out because of point B down here, but they decided that it worked better in up front, so they added that back in. So you do have to make sure the offensive players are 5 yards away. You don't have to worry about the defensive players. I will say that if it's a restart where you already stop play for a significant period of time, like after a timeout, after you've reported a penalty, try to get the defenders back 5 yards. You don't want to have to deal with this because it's a pain. So where you have a little bit of time to arrange the players, do that ahead of time if you can. Otherwise, if it's just a turnover because of a loose ball push or something, as soon as the offensive players are 5 yards away, you can blow that whistle. What does the defensive player have to do? If he's more than 5 yards away, doesn't have to do anything, can just play and away he goes. But if he's less than 5 yards away, he has to do a couple of things. First of all, he has to allow the player in possession a direct path to the goal. Okay, so we drew this up last year for the MSHSL rules, and we might put it back in there. But I always think of kind of like a circle, and if you think about the sort of 90-degree slice that's right in front of a player going to the goal, if the defender's in there, he must actively get out of the other player's way. So at that point, that player has to actively get out of his way. Kind of like a goalie in the crease. The defensive player, it's on him to open up that space. He doesn't have to make contact. If he's in that space, you blow the whistle, it's already going to be a flag down. He doesn't have to touch him or anything else. He's there, that's it. Particularly if he causes the offensive player to deviate one direction or the other. Now, what if he's not in that front 90 degrees? If he's in the other 270 degrees, to the left, to the right, the defensive player can be there. He can be standing there. That's not a foul when you blow the whistle. Perfectly fine for him to be there. He can't do anything to influence what the offensive player is going to do. He has to let him run away, and he has to let him get away till there's a 5 yard cushion, and then he can start doing something to defend a pass, check him, or whatever else. Contact is not required here. It's not like a moving pick or anything like that. If you just run alongside of a guy and never give him 5 yards, you're taking away that passing lane. That's defending a player. If you ask a coach how to defend a player, it doesn't always mean making contact with them. So if that player is doing something that you would consider playing defense, then it's going to be a flag. Now, they can get flagged more than once for this, but try not to, boom, and 2 steps later, boom, it's a second flag. But if they run with them up the field for, 40 yards, it may be a second foul at that point in time. And there's a couple other things still in here. The goalkeeper has to get back, gets his 5 seconds to get back in the crease. So everybody learn to count to 5, okay? You got to at least get that far. And so that's this one. It's been in the college rule book for a while. So a lot of players are aware of it. A lot of coaches are aware of it. But I think for us officials that just do high school, it is a bit of a new thing. Little technical change. Concussion timeouts were, for some reason, under team timeouts, they're official timeouts. So don't worry about it. It's the way we've done it before. The second big change that we did for 2020, but didn't really get to use, is to really overhaul the rules on illegal crosses. So you can see a lot of stuff was stricken out of the existing rule, and I think simplified. So what it looks like now is this. If a player has a cross that is illegal, it's a 2-minute penalty. Doesn't matter what is illegal about the cross, it's 2 minutes, period, end of story. The reason they dropped it down to a 2-minute penalty was they wanted to make it more reasonable in relative to what we're doing with the high hits and those kind of penalties. They didn't really think that 3 minutes for an illegal cross was the same thing or should be equated to a 3-minute cross check to the head kind of thing. So that's why they went to 2. It does elevate the old 1-minute penalties to 2-minute penalties, but it's always 2 minutes non-releasable. And every cross goes back to the player. So, you know, if it's a completely mangled head, there's no way to fix it, right? But if it's too short, they can maybe unscrew the head and put it on a different handle. They found that in a lot of places, you know, our high school players don't come to games with 3 and 4 crosses to play with. So this way they can at least do something to try to correct it if it's correctable in any way, shape, or form. Some things we know just aren't corrected. To be very clear, make sure that you do not have to demonstrate what was wrong with the stick. You should tell the coach what was wrong, but you don't have to demonstrate it. So it's too long, it's too short, it's too wide, it's too deep, it didn't roll out, whatever it is, tell them so that they know what to work on, but you don't have to demonstrate it. And more importantly, you do not re-inspect the stick if it's coming back on the field. So it's up to the coach. The coach is certified that everything is legal. He's essentially telling you at the beginning of the game that he knows what legal and illegal equipment is. If you go back, that's actually part of what he's supposed to instruct his team on. So he should be able to determine if a stick is legal or not. And it's not up to us to go and re-inspect it and say, okay, yep, you're good. You can play with this now. Now, if it comes back out and it's still illegal, it's another penalty, and away we go. They did take the exception rule out of here. So if you go back and you look, there's this big exception about hanging string length and caps. That doesn't mean it's removed from the rules. They just didn't want to repeat it. So it's actually back in rule 173 that says if your strings are too long or you're missing an end cap, that is not an illegal stick, but it's a stick that needs to be fixed before it can be used again. And the rule here is, and I think this is different from the NCAA, but I'll have to check. If the player does bring that stick back after he's been told his strings are too long or he needs an end cap on it and he plays with it, we're going to assess that as an illegal stick penalty, not as an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. So illegal stick, so he gets the 2 minutes and away we go. All right, so we didn't really add in. This one again was something that was confused in the rule book previously due to a couple of situations as well as things that were in the rules. So we made it much more clear. If you throw your cross at any time during a lacrosse game, it's a penalty. Dead ball, live ball, doesn't matter. You never throw a cross for any reason. If you happen to do it with some sort of malice or some sort of intent to gain an advantage, then we're going to call that unsportsmanlike conduct. Okay, so if you throw your cross at the ball, at a player or other game personnel, we're going with unsportsmanlike conduct, minimum of 1 minute, non-releasable. If you look in your rule book, it appears that item E is in the section of releasable unsportsmanlike conduct. That's a typo, okay? So it should be non-releasable. So if you have your rule book there, you want to go to page 64, you can make that note. So this is a non-releasable and hence counts towards ejection unsportsmanlike conduct. Now, what if you just throw your stick in the air because you just scored a goal or you want to do something else? Then we're going to call that a technical foul. If it's just not to be dangerous or potentially gain an advantage. Okay. If you remember 2019, I think we adopted the extended flag down rule, right? So when there's a flag down now, we basically let play go on a lot longer. We're not having the team that's offended keep it in the box. The ball can be on the ground, all kinds of other things. It's a lot longer play on at this point. So we missed a bunch of little changes there, okay? So this one basically updates and says, let's suppose there's a slash, okay? Flag down, and then the team loses possession. And the ball's rolling around, and during that loose ball time, we have another technical foul. That technical foul then becomes a 30-second penalty. And so that's what's there. If there isn't a flag down, then it's just the traditional technical foul issue where we award the ball. So this is that idea of a loose ball with a flag down is different than a loose ball with no flag down when you're thinking about how to penalize a technical foul. And again, just some more updates about doing things differently when there is a flag down versus not. And it essentially is that idea that when there's a flag down, that is really like the team that was fouled having possession, okay? They still have possession of the ball, so any technical foul at that point becomes another flag down. So in this case, no flag down, do things differently. If there is a flag down, then we do something else. So again, this is how we called it back in 2019, but now we just had to fix the rules a little bit. It affected more things than we thought. And here's our other version of throwing your cross. This is in the illegal procedure. So throwing the cross, other than at the ball, another player of the game personnel is our technical fouls. So there were some other typos and mistakes in the rule book, but I think this is probably a good place to stop real quick and see if there's any questions or discussion over those major updates. Oh, there's
Matt, can you hear me?
the chat. Sorry, I couldn't look at the chat while I was presenting. Damon.
Oh,
You're still muted, buddy.
hey, Matt, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right. So for the chest protectors,
Yes.
we're not inspecting those, right? So if a coach requests the equipment check, specifically asking for that, we don't check those.
Nope.
Just like we don't check for cups.
Exactly.
So Matt,
Okay.
can I add just something for all of you guys to know during this fall winter league? I'll give a shout out to people like Chris Larson. I know there are probably some of you others who have been actually speaking to the coaches on the sidelines about the change for the goaltenders. Some of them clearly, because they're just helping for fall, don't know the rules. So they're appreciative of knowing it. So tell them, because what you want to tell them is, please talk to the high school coach and make sure that this is resolved, because we are not going to be allowing them to play, after that time. If a coach says that he doesn't know, tell him to go check. All right, that's what we got to do. It's a safety issue. This is not one of those ones where we have an option to leave it alone. But I know some people are more knowledgeable about it than others. But we're not going to go pull the shirt up and check it. We will at least talk to the coach on the sidelines now, and we will. I'm sure that Matt and I, when we're doing the high school stuff, will be giving a big reminder to all the high school coaches that this is their responsibility to make sure it's being attended to.
Yeah, we've had the MSHSL do what they can at this point. I'm not sure they know who all the coaches are at this point in the year. We did a big push. The YLM had their annual meeting. We sent it out there as well. So we're trying to get it out through every channel possible. So it never hurts to make that reminder. And to be honest, at these high school leagues that we're doing right now, just asking the goalkeeper or reminding him, because that's probably the best place to get to it. So I think, did everybody get their questions in the chat answered? Anybody, any outstanding ones? All right, well, I guess I will continue.
I'll answer the T question for Nick Cassina. What a dingbat. I'll take care of that one.
Matt, I wanted
Yes.
to see if we were going to have any kind of guidance regarding something that Harold had brought up last year when the stick check rule came. Because illegal sticks are no longer kept at the table, they could be on the bench. The rule says you can check any stick on the bench. So a face-off stick that is grossly deformed, the player isn't going to use it anymore. They put it on the bench. Coach sees that. 2 minutes later, asks for a check on that stick to gain another 2-minute advantage.
Yeah, so a couple things with that. What I have done with coaches is said, if you have an illegal stick and you're not going to fix it, okay, then get it away from the bench area, right? Zip it up in a bag or leave it at the table if you want. But if you're sure that you're just not going to fix it, make sure that it's nowhere around. Mostly just to make sure somebody doesn't pick it up and use it, right? That's probably the worst case scenario. We don't get too many coaches, pointing, check that stick, because we have to do a check on a player. So unless a player picks up the stick, it's a little hard to justify checking it. But so I'm not as worried about that. But and as Harold just posted, a request for an inspection should refer to a specific player. If it isn't in their hand, it can't be requested. The only exception I've seen to that is the player that runs over the sidelines and drops their stick and changes it, and you saw that happen. I'm happy to go get that stick that they were just using. It was in their hand when it happened. But if it's just laying in a pile on the sidelines, we probably shouldn't be checking it. But we do want to make sure that the coaches are aware that there is that danger. Unscrew the head, if that's, it might be as simple as that, or zip it in a bag. It's pretty easy to make sure that that's not going to happen. So, if it's clearly a broken stick or not a whole stick, you can't check that, because remember, a broken stick is not a stick. That's the way we treat it on the field, and that's the way we treat it on the sideline as well. Does that help, Chris? Just give me a thumbs up.
Want to make sure we were kind of all coming from the same page.
Yep. No, it's not intended to be a gotcha here. The reason to go with the letting them have it back to fix it was a lot about that. Oh, I want to keep using this head, but I got to put it on a different shaft because it was too long, too short, that kind of a thing. And so they did feel that was kind of hard on players that didn't have multiple sticks. So, okay, well, I don't have a whole lot left here, guys, so we're going to have some discussion time, but let's take a look at what we got. We can talk about a few other things. So let's go back to sharing. So we do have some other typos and mistakes in the 2020 rule book that we should fix. Here we go. This one was, I thought, kind of funny. I'm not sure how it happened, but if you go to Rule 1, Section 8, they gave a whole bunch of different situations here with illegal sticks. And so the pocket is wrong. The measurement is wrong. The strings are longer than 2 inches, or the shaft is cambered. And for whatever reason, if you read this situation as it is in the rule book, C and D are reversed. Okay, so the string length is just, a fix it, and if they fail to fix it, then we get the penalty. And the cambered shaft is automatically an illegal stick, and that's the way it is. So in the rule book, C and D are just flip-flop. The way you read it here in red is corrected. Okay, so that's on page 15 for those of you keeping track at home. So this one was also updated. I don't think it really changes it. It probably wasn't absolutely necessary because it wasn't necessarily wrong, but the situation is we have a late hit on A1, okay? So, and the question is it too late? In other words, it was after the shot, but being after the shot doesn't necessarily make it illegal. So it's legal if the body check is part of a continuous motion, right? If it was avoidable, yet they continued to just come through with the same full force, we have the option of calling that unnecessary roughness. And if we think the player was in a defenseless position when the check was made, then we can go to targeting or defenseless player, and we can go all the way up to a 3-minute non-releasable. So they added in that clarification that if that player could have held up, could have avoided the check, could have reduced the severity of the check, call it unnecessary roughness. That was not in the language of the rule before. Okay. So hopefully it'll be in the 2022 rule book, but I'm never confident that all those changes always pass through. So 5.11 situation, you should probably just cross it out because it doesn't even make any sense anymore. They forgot to change it from being a 2-minute to, a 3-minute illegal cross to a 2-minute illegal cross, which once it's a 2-minute illegal cross penalty, then the player only has 4 minutes of penalties and is not fouled out. So the point of the situation is to emphasize that once a player gets to 5 minutes of personal fouls, they foul out of the game. They're not ejected. It's not that kind of severity there, but they are no longer allowed to participate in the remainder of the current game. So that's so the situation now, when you change that, really makes no sense. So it really needs to be completely rewritten. But just that reminder, the difference between fouling out and ejection, and when does fouling out occur? It doesn't include any of those technical fouls, just 5 minutes or more of personal fouls. So that was all I had formally for rules changes. Sorry, it probably could have shortened it up. There was a couple other things I wanted to talk about, but I want to make sure we got all our questions in on this first. So. Anybody else have any other questions about rules? They don't have to be over rules changes.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, what is the advantage to long strings?
There's two things with the long strings. One is that I haven't seen it as much recently, but in years past, players would string their stick so that they could pull on the strings and tighten up the pocket so that it wouldn't be too deep. And having longer strings made that a whole lot easier to do. So when they're only about 2 inches long, it's a lot easier, harder to grab them and give them a jerk than if they're 6, 7 inches long. And the other reason is that it's just a little bit dangerous if it gets up in somebody's face or eyes. So those were the two reasons that I've been given that you want to keep those strings shorter. Anybody else want to comment?
Matt?
Yes.
So I don't know if it would be of interest to anybody, but I have the 2020, it's a 12-minute Federation rules changes video lined up. I was going to probably play it as a filler during mine if needed, but if doesn't anything go on, do you think there'd be a value of maybe showing that now?
We can. That was going to be one of the other things I definitely wanted to mention. The one other rule change I did want to talk about, it's not for, again, it's a 2019 change, was the rule on holding. So if you remember, we used to say you could not use the part of the stick between your hands at all to hold a player. And so what we wanted to do is really update the rule to match what was happening. So the statement now is that you can use the part of the handle between your hands as long as your hands are no more than shoulder width apart. So, think about how wide your shoulders are, go out with that. That's about the width. So I'd say, maybe 12 inches between the gloves is about the max that you can use. So it allows a little bit more flexibility that way. But what we have to be really careful with is that even if your hands are within shoulder width apart, you can still get called for a cross check. So it's a hold, they're not allowed to cross check with their hands close together. So there's no thrusting, no extending, that sort of thing. So I think that's an area that we really need to be aware of this year and be careful about calling correctly and ensuring that, maybe some preventative officiating. Hey, you can play that way, but you gotta have your hands closer together. They don't have to be, hand to hand anymore. But we can't have that, way out like this kind of thing. It's just not gonna work. So that was the only other rule that I wanted to mention. I know, Brad, videos sometimes work okay on Zoom. We could try it. You want to pull it up and share your screen?
No, Harold was commenting about it on the online. I know I tried it earlier to see if it would work on it, but I know that the moment we add all these smiling faces, it does become a challenge. But I mean, we can give it a shot. I know that during mine, I've got a couple of short ones. I'm hoping they're going to work. But you're right, they do get a little, just for the benefit of all you guys. Zoom's got some wonderful features, but it does have some challenges when you're pulling video off it. But if
Yeah,
you
what
got
I
it,
can
Matt,
do, so if you go to US Lacrosse and you go to, I think it's rules.
I've got it here for you if you want the link.
Yeah, you could probably just post that or paste it in the chat for everybody.
I will.
Yeah, the rules video this year is really, really short. I would probably recommend you go watch last year's as well. It doesn't hurt. And so that you look like you have the 2021. There's also a 2021 as well.
I like this 2021. So I 2021. Sorry, it was pretty good. So
yep, no, it's and like I said, the only thing that you need to add for sure to the 2020 rules video is chest protectors and that sort of thing. So
yes.
I guess I talked faster than I intended to, but you got anything else anybody wants to bring up rules wise?
Yeah, Matt, I just had a question on 422.1 with the restarts. So you talked about a potential scenario where the person playing the ball on a restart is within 5 yards and within that pie.
Yep.
And so that's essentially automatically a delay a game penalty because it's presumed that the player would have to change their path to the goal because that person is there. And then you had mentioned how potentially if they stay within the 5 yard radius, that eventually further down the field, they could, in theory, get also a delay a game penalty for the same thing. Realistically, are we going to adjudicate it that way, or is it just going to be the first instance of it?
Yeah, I think the second one is if he just kind of runs down the field and defends him, right? And then you put a flag down, right? And then he comes over and now he initiates contact. Okay, so they've sort of escalated the issue. Does that make sense? But if they just continue to do the same thing the whole way, then yeah, I would call that a single foul. So I think, and I think Harold got that right. If you want that second call, that's got to be some contact or got to do something at that point in time. But if the contact comes, after 2 or 3 steps, it's not one for being too close and then another one for the contact right away. I'm talking about 30 yards up the field, we make contact. Now we've kind of done it again, if you will.
Sure. Okay. And I can imagine the likelihood of that occurring is pretty low.
Exactly.
And
the idea is to say it's
like once or twice.
Yeah, it's not impossible, but it's so we just want to make sure that if you need that tool, it's there, but we're going to try to avoid it.
And Matt, I would be very careful about saying it's an automatic foul if the defensive player starts in the piece of the pie. It has a lot to do with what his first motion is. If his first motion is to avoid and get out of that lane, and he doesn't interfere with the offensive player, we're not going to throw a flag.
Yeah, I think
or if there's a player that's
if he stays there.
Circle.
Yeah, if he stays there, he's in there. But yeah, as soon as the whistle blows, he's stepping out and giving that space. We're good.
There's a lot of times they're moving through the space. I want to make sure we're clear that it's not automatic if there is a body in that position.
Yeah, and I'm glad that I brought that up because intuitively, like as I'm watching it, I know if the intention is for the player to get out of the way versus if they're playing the ball. So I was confused about the piece of the pie being an automatic
Yep.
foul, which it is not.
Yeah, maybe the better way to state that is if that player is in that sector, that piece of the pie, they have to actively do something and get out of the way, right? They even just kind of standing there, if they're going to, often be interfering with that path to the goal. So they've had to, in the other 3/4 of the circle, they can stand there and do nothing and have no worry about getting a flag.
Got it. So it's active avoidance is what we want when we're in that pie.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Appreciate it.
Petrosky, you didn't get enough sleep last night, huh?
Hey, on an admin note, a lot of you guys are showing like names I don't recognize, like admin, owner, Betty. Send me an email or text me what your names are because I can't tell. Most of you guys I recognize, even though a lot of you still have bedhead hair. But yeah, send me either an email or text me, either johnmday@gmail or the training manager email, and I'll get it logged. Thanks.
John,
If you go to your picture and hover over your own picture, generally there's 3 dots in the upper right. You can go up and change your name. For those of you that are calling in, yeah, you'll probably have to let us know who you are so we can make sure you get credit for attendance.
John, I have most everybody down, just the same thing you were mentioning.
Okay, thanks.
Matt, one thing I think is really important with this new restart rule is for us to do tons of education. The big problem with this rule is that it might only come up 1 or 2 times a game, and a lot of the time there's no foul. And so the players don't get enough reps that they understand what the heck is going on when you throw the flag. And so I've spent a lot of time in the fall talking to coaches before the game about the rule. And then when it did come up, trying to really make sure everybody understood why that one was a foul and the other one wasn't.
100% agree, Harold. I think it worked to our advantage, I guess, to lose a year of games, at the varsity level, so that this will hopefully people have heard about it a little bit longer, but they're still not as well versed in this as they could be. Another little hint that I've done even before we had this rule is if you have restarts near the midfield line, don't start between the 45 and the 50 on the defensive side. Either back them up so that the player can be anywhere, can be there, or move them up a couple of steps to the 47 or 48, so it's absolutely clear they can't be there. It makes it a little bit easier about where you restart. And 1 step forward or back, it's going to provide a bit of an advantage to one or the other, but we're never that accurate with where our restarts are anyway. Anybody else with any other suggestions on the restart rule? I think I've seen 1 or 2 calls this in Winter League in the 6 or 9 games that I've done. Anybody else seen any?
Well, I like what Chris said is that just watching that defensive player's initial reaction, where that goes, I think that helps out a lot.
Yeah. You can tell if he's trying to get out of the way or if he's trying to still influence what that other player's doing.
And then, concurrent with that, we have to recognize that if that defensive player is trying to get out of the way and the offensive player then veers off that line to generate contact in an attempt to draw this foul, it's going to be a play on. There's going to be no call there.
Yeah.
Matt,
Matt, hey Matt, I had a quick question. You said you had done a couple games so far for the Winter League. If you haven't had that scenario, have the coaches been aware of that rule, or is that something that we kind of have to coach them up with a little bit too, because there hasn't been too many games
so
since that rule's been enforced?
For us, the big problem in Winter League is that the coaches aren't allowed to participate. So it's usually some dad or a third party. Now, some of them find somebody that knows something about lacrosse to come in and work with the teams. So in that case, yeah. But a lot of times it's just and adults standing on the sidelines and has not really been providing a lot of coaching. So I generally try to take it up with the player themselves when I get a chance. So yeah, it would be nice if we could have our coaches in there. I think it would go a long way to educating them, but unfortunately that's not allowed under MSHSL rules.
Okay, thank you.
To add what Matt said, you guys, we've done several games already this fall, and here's what's best to tell you. The players are more likely to know the rule change. The coaches working the sidelines are often not going to, but you'll know right away who they are or what they're at. The kids understand the concept because a lot of them have been doing, a lot of these kids are travel team kids, and they've been playing in places where they've been using either NCAA rules or modified rules, and they do get this concept of what they have to do. We've had to call it. Coaches occasionally ask what it is. You tell them, they go, oh, there's no argument, no complaints about it. And I think that what's good for all of you when you go out and start to work the games is tell yourself, if you're doing 2, 3 1-hour games in a day, focus for a couple quarters of each game on making sure that those restarts meet the new guidelines. It would really help everybody to get used to doing it. The earlier we call it, the easier it gets later on.
Yeah, and we can do a lot, while we don't see a high percentage of the players or even teams in winter leagues, the more we stick with some of the stuff there, the wider it gets disseminated. So
my experience from calling this is players understand it, but they expect we are going to warn them that they are not in compliance. And even when I just sort of preventive officiate and say, you're too close / flag down, you didn't warn me. Well, I did, and I don't have to. So there is an expectation that we're going to tell them to get away the way we used to. And that's where I've run into the biggest source of confusion with this rule.
Yeah, and we're going to try, I suspect, to keep our pregame meetings with coaches, and might just be one captain at the coin toss just to maintain social distancing here in the spring. We'll see where we are with all of that. But it never hurts to pick 1 or 2 things to remind the coaches to remind their teams, or to ask the captains to remind their teams of. And you might say, hey, just remember, you got to give that 5-yard cushion, and we're not giving you any warning. We're just going to blow the whistle because we want to get the game moving. So, that's that. You can usually get one sort of little reminder in with the coaches, and maybe one with the captains. Much more than that, they're not focused on stuff that we're saying. So, if that's something you think is important, use that. If there's something else, go ahead and use that too. But not a bad time to bring up a reminder.
And in all honesty, Matt, we went through this adjustment in college, and it took 2 weeks for people to figure it out. It wasn't that hard.
Yep.
They get it. It's not going to be a season-long burden.
No.
It's going to be something we're going to call with some regularity in the first, 5 games you do. You'll do it. You'll see 10 different teams. You'll probably call it a few times. You may call it twice the rest of the year.
Yeah. And again, I don't think there's a problem that when we're in an extended stoppage, like I said, following a timeout, following a penalty report, to go ahead and try to make sure the restart isn't going to have this. It's really on those quick restarts where it's a loose ball turnover, awarding illegal screen type thing, where it's a really quick, you want to give the ball to the other team and get going. So,
Matt, a couple things with this. One, a reminder that my understanding is this rule does apply for 12U and 14U.
That is correct.
And those players are much less likely to understand the rule than the high school players. I had a player in a fall game that I called it, and he was like, I've been playing for 6 years and I've never had that called on me. And it's like, yeah, that's because it's a new rule.
Because for
the other thing,
6 years, it wasn't the rule.
Yeah. The other thing I picked up from you is we want to get that ball in play as soon as we can after, we got to make sure the goalie's had 5 seconds to get back, the ball's in the right spot, and there's no offensive player within 5 yards. We want to get that ball in. But then after we blow the whistle, you taught me to yell, "That's not 5, that's not 5," to kind of give the guy a clue. You better not play him. And then if he plays him, it's a flag. And kind of to Ross's point, you've given him a warning that you're not required to. And it's not, I don't view it as coaching, it's just informational. It's just putting it out there so they know. And a lot of times they'll look at you and you'll see the light go off and they'll give them the 5 yards.
Right. Yeah, I have taken to giving that warning after I blow the whistle because I want to get the play restarted quickly, right?
Yeah.
And so I wasn't trapping anybody previously, and I'm not trying to trap anybody this time. So I will occasionally do that if I think it's helpful, particularly if it's one of those early season games and we're really trying to teach the rule a little bit more. Again, a lot of this stuff, do it in the first couple of weeks, and as Chris said, it really helps them learn. Hopefully by mid-season or the end of the season, and definitely into the playoffs, that's the kind of stuff that we probably aren't going to be doing. Well, anybody else have any other particular rules they want to talk about?
Hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I had my like Bluetooth thing on. It wasn't registering my voice, which is probably good for you guys. I have a quick question. So if if the player is outside that pie, right, and the offensive player moves towards them, we're not going to ding that. But what if it's a passing lane situation? So let's say we've got someone getting a restart near the top of the box, and they want to move that ball out to the alley, and the player's trying to get out of that cone, that pie, right? But the player turns and makes that pass across to a teammate, and whether it hits the defensive player who's trying their damage to get out of the way, or it interrupts that pass situation. I'm just curious. And I can see that being. I can already picture the coaches in my head who would argue that is blocking and taking their advantage away within being the 5 yards, but the defensive player is trying their best to get out of the space that we've asked them to get out of.
Well, and I think that's the same thing that Chris mentioned earlier. If that player is trying to get out of the way and the offensive player sort of goes in that direction and initiates the contact, it's not a foul. If that player is getting out of the way and essentially accidentally gets hit by the ball, he's not trying to get his stick up in the air, but it bonks off the back of his helmet, I think I'm letting it go. I don't think he would. That is not. You don't turn your back on a guy and accidentally get hit in the helmet. That's not how you would be taught to defend a player. At that point, he's no longer defending the player. So that's really what the rule says. You can't defend the player. And if he has his back turned and he's getting out of the way, he's not defending the player. So I think we're pretty safe in making the call that way.
That's the classic reverse face guard. Everybody knows that.
Yeah. Thank you.
All good questions.
Matt, you said any other rule questions. I was wondering if in 10 words or fewer, you could explain simultaneous fouls to us.
I just refer you to the NFHS video because I thought they did such a great job.
Well, why do you do this?
You gotta have
simultaneous fouls. Yeah, again, real simple. If your flag's down, everything that comes after the flag down is simultaneous fouls. Or if you put your hand up for a play on, everything that happens after that's a simultaneous foul. So you can figure out how to do it by reading the rule book. The good news is the coaches don't know diddly about it, so figure out what tends to work. Harold, you need to write the book Simultaneous Fouls for Dummies.
I'll get right on that.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a bestseller, unfortunately. I thought that for those of you guys that didn't know, NFHS did a thing on simultaneous fouls, and they gave a very good practical explanation of things, but technically by what is actually simultaneous fouls, they were just off in all their definitions. So it was interesting.
The presentation was better than the usual group, though.
Yes. Yep.
I want a case of beer from Stan Simmons on a simultaneous fouls bet during a college game.
How many do you have left? Because I know you don't drink that much, Harold.
Oh, Harold will drink other people's beer.
Oh, better stop the recording now.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, it is getting on to about 5:02. I sat through a guy yesterday who did a 3-hour meeting and didn't give one reasonable break in it. And I thought that was just unconscionable. So we do want to give you a couple minutes to get up, stretch. Brad needs to refill his whiskey and coke and coffee there so that he's ready to go later. But other than that, I appreciate your attention, appreciate the great questions, and looking forward to a season. I won't even say a great season. I'm just looking forward to a season this year.
A season.
So,
All right, guys, we'll take a break and we'll start at the top of the hour.
Same screens, guys.
Thanks.
all right. Thanks, guys. See you back here in a bit.